Up next, Dasjon and Chandra McMillion join Authentically Detroit to explore how New Orleans and Detroit are working together to connect community improvement work between the two cities. But first, this week's hot take: price gouging allegations prompt delay of Detroit towing contract. Keep it locked. We will be right back.
The Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the neighborhood tech hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the WDET studios. We are a content partner to bridgedetroit.com. I am Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens-Davidson.
We want to thank you so much for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. We can't wait to get into hot takes, but before we do that, how is this blessed day finding you, Donna Givens-Davidson? It's good to see you.
Good to be seen. I'm good, but a little tired. It's been a long week and it's Tuesday.
Yeah, it's Tuesday and it's Tuesday morning. Also joining us is Chandra McMillion in the studio. Chandra, how are you doing?
Very well. Good to be here on this beautiful day.
Yeah, it is a beautiful day. It's about almost going to hit 70 degrees in the city of Detroit today, and we don't know how many more days we're going to have like this.
Yes.
And so sort of taking it all in.
I said when we went to New Orleans, the weather cooled off, and I said we took Detroit to New Orleans, but when we came back, the weather warmed up and we brought New Orleans back to Detroit.
Thank you for bringing it back.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. On the phone with us is my colleague and friend out of New Orleans. He's the executive director of Broad Street Connections, Dasjon Jordan. How is this blessed Tuesday finding you, sir?
It is beautiful. The sky is blue, the weather is good, and it's not super humid right now in New Orleans, so I'm blessed and grateful.
What's the temperature in New Orleans? Just give us a look. What's it like down there?
I think it's 72.
Ooh, that's nice.
Let's see if I'm right.
That's nice. And see, that's going to be our high. You haven't even warmed up to your high yet. It's early in the morning in New Orleans. It's 9 o'clock? Man, so super excited to have both of you on for the very first time. So welcome. We gonna be nice. We're gonna have a good time. Yeah. It's time for Hot Takes, where we run down some of this week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. For Hot Takes, price gouging allegations prompt delay of Detroit towing contract. This was brought to City Council by Zeke Williams. For those of you who don't know Zeke is a community activist who's the founder of New Era Detroit. You see them in the streets all the time, marching, passing out resources, trying to just, be, boots on the ground. Zeke Williams brought a concern to the council last week about, price gouging and towing right near DMC, where folks who can't afford to park downtown or in any of the DMC parking structures would park in an adjacent apartment building and get their cars towed, but what really have to pay astronomical prices. The name of the contractor, the towing contractor, is Gotch and Sons or Gach and Sons. The contract amount that was slated to come up for a vote was about $187,500. That has since been delayed, prompting City Council President Mary Sheffield to send a list of questions to sort of clarify the terms and agreement with this towing company. And this contract that it was going to come before council was for a 5-year term. We've been talking a lot about towing. An officer from DPD was just charged in connection with the towing and bribery scandal last week by our new district attorney. Donna, what say you?
Well, what I say is that, as we talked about, it was either last week or the week before, we talked about the fact that the city of Detroit wants these new cameras for the parking.
For the parking vehicles.
Parking vehicles, because they want to be able to identify the cars that need to be towed as part of a collection activity. And it seems to me irresponsible in light of price gouging concerns that we would be trying to accelerate or increase the amount of vehicles we're being towed, especially since the end stage of towing is if you don't pay your tickets, fees, storage fees, and all of the price gouging amounts within 21 days, you lose your vehicle forever. Mm-hmm. And that feels as though it is an unconstitutional taking. Although, I don't have the right to interpret the Constitution. This is just my opinion, and have it be heard.
Judges.
I do know judges. But that won't help me if they take my car. Like, I know you. Like, hey, girl. Car's gone. But it really does impact people who are low income in Detroit. And we've already had the issues of people having difficulties restoring their licenses. But, the other thing you need in Detroit is a car. And so
really
21 days to pay off this kind of debt seems unreasonable. And I wish somebody would stop and take a look at that and say, let's suspend this until such time as we can determine that the towing fees are fair and reasonable. Already we know our parking ticket fees are not fair and reasonable. Higher than almost any city in the nation, in the poorest city in the nation. And the people it impacts most are people who are longstanding Detroiters.
Yeah, I want to contextualize this story though, and put it in place that this particular concern is about people parking in an apartment complex's parking lot without a permit, right? So I'm not sure if the city of Detroit's parking department is issuing tickets rather than it is the apartment complex going and checking and having these cars towed.
But this is a towing company that has a contract with the city.
Exactly.
So even though this situation is a different situation, they're not towing based on non-payment of tickets, it's the same company that the city employs to tow cars. This is not just a company that this apartment complex has contracted with. And so when you have companies like that, and this is not the only one that are gouging people, and I have been a victim of price gouging and parking tickets.
You talked about it on this before.
And many Detroiters have, but I was able to come up with the money. I'm well employed and the like, and some of these tickets go back not just 5 years. Sometimes they go back 10 years, 12 years. And sometimes these are cars registered in your name that you didn't drive. Let's say you had a family member driving that car. And at one time I had other family members driving cars. My mother and my sister. My sister and children were driving cars that I owned. And so anybody who got a ticket could end up in that record. And then I had to pay. And so I think when you think through that happening, another family member had that happen to them recently too. And so I think let's think through the impact of this.
I do want to, provide this statement that the GOT company sent in. It told Bridge Detroit that our record is perfect. We've been looked at and examined. We keep records. We follow the ordinance. We do exactly what the ordinance says. We're working for people that have a problem. They're trying to run an apartment complex and parking for their tenants. But at certain points, people have to come home and hadn't had a parking spot. So that's the other side to this.
Doesn't justify price gouging.
I don't think it
justifies towing, but not price gouging.
I don't think it justifies it either. But my question is what should council do about this? I mean, like and I'm asking this question because I'm seeing this trend with the current city council, and you may hear the frustration in my voice, and it's okay. That contracts that come up that are controversial. They delay voting on it. They delay approving it for however many weeks if there are weeks, and then they come right back and go ahead and approve it.
Well, we've gone from the rubber stamp to the slow rubber stamp. It's like, at some point it's still rubber, okay? I think that really what council should do, what any municipality should do, is if the consequence to parking violations is towing, is set fees and say these are the fees that you're allowed to charge. Not allow these people who are not Detroiters. I don't know if you've ever been to, I used to go to police commission meetings where all the tow companies would come in, and it's just a bunch of white people sitting in the room talking about their rights to tow and make money off of Detroiters. They don't live in Detroit. They don't have a connection to Detroit, but they've had businesses in Detroit for years that they've made money doing this. And so there is this feeling of predation or exploitation coming into our city. If you have a law or if you have a rule that says after 21 days you forfeit ownership of your car and you have to pay storage fees and towing fees and all of these fees and penalties from back tickets, then you should have the responsibility of determining what the ceiling to those tickets are. You can't just say, throw up your hands and say, oh, my bad, I didn't know that's a private company, because what you've done is you've privatized enforcement. It's not dissimilar from a private prison. It's a private consequence, a company that is given the role of enforcing a private consequence on citizens that you're supposed to be protecting and acting on behalf of. And so when I hear city council and others working to try to make sure that they're being fair to these tow companies and that they're not interfering with their rights, I wonder about the rights of people who actually vote these people in office.
Yeah, I want to spend some time here. Detroit's previous city council passed an ordinance last October. Andre Spivey got in trouble for this, and the police officer just got charged for this, aimed at overhauling predatory towing practices. Under the ordinance, towing companies must receive, catch this, everybody, approval from the Detroit Police Department before removing a vehicle, and the companies can't take a vehicle if the owner shows up before the car is towed. How many stories have we heard about people still getting their cars towed when they show up and try to stop it? Zeke shared a stack of photos with the President Sheffield's office, which he said were taken from the apartment parking lot, that show a spotter for towing company flagging cars that don't have a permit and other images, right? And so here is what Gok said. The police need to see the VIN number. So when we call the car in, if we can't get the VIN, we do it by the plate. But the police officer needs to then verify the VIN. So they're unlocking the doors for the police officers. They said, we never had anybody accuse us of stealing anything. All of our trucks have video cameras. Our yard has 46 cameras. I never had an instance where somebody has said my stuff has been stolen. And so it feels like a bunch of seesawing back and forth.
Didn't a police officer just go to prison or just get convicted of a crime for helping these tow drivers?
Bridge literally just wrote about it.
Okay, so the reality that saying police are approving that does not help a private citizen. I think these have to be laws and policies that are enacted by our city council, that are enshrined actually in our rights from the state, so that people can't just come and do this. And as you know, I looked at the state law around parking enforcement, and I didn't see any justification in state law. This is basically at the city level, where they're treating parked cars with tickets as if they are abandoned vehicles, and then these people in private lots. I think the other question is, who owns those apartment buildings? I think I know at least who developed those apartment buildings, and I've heard allegations to this effect in the past, but I'm not going to talk about it here without more information.
Yeah, and so you guys, once again, this is a saga. We released a story last week, about the former police officer who has pleaded guilty to conspiring with a police lieutenant to accept $3,400 in bribes from a towing company, marking the latest development in the ongoing federal corruption investigation. The DOJ announced Thursday that Daniel Vickers, that's his name, a 54-year-old Livonia resident, admitted to illegally conspiring with Detroit Police Lieutenant John Kennedy, who used his influence as a supervisor to send business to a towing company that wasn't contracted with the Detroit Police Department. In exchange, the pair received money and gifts. Authorities said both Vickers and Kennedy face up to 5 years in prison and fines of $250,000. We have a problem.
We do.
We have
two council people in the last term who pled guilty to basically some type of illegal relationships with these companies, and it's still an issue. And so the mayor promised to clean it up. The city council has an ordinance, but people are still dealing with these issues. I think we need to nip it in the bud. And I think City Council needs to do more than just delay. They need to investigate. They need to come up with it and listen to the community and propose new solutions.
Yeah.
Continue to delay and delay and delay while they either go out into the community and explain to the community what they don't think the community understands, or pretend to listen to the community but then pass bills or ordinances the day after you commission a survey. Makes no sense to me. It's the pretense of caring and the pretense of listening is almost more insulting than just going ahead and just doing it in the first place.
And I think for an elected official, especially if you are on the city council, to continue, I think it's okay for you to talk about what you've been hearing, but I would like to see what you've been hearing on the record. Right? You can say, I've been having these conversations, but where are the documents? Show the record. And for this latest contract that we discussed last week around ShotSpotter, did you see Letitia's survey results? Were they published?
I responded to a survey, and the next day she voted in favor of ShotSpotter. Now, she knows how to reach us. She has been very active with the LEAP Coalition. She knows how to ask us to call a coalition meeting. Both the co-chairs of the LEAP Coalition, Edith Ford and Brenda Butler, campaigned for her seat in District 4, as well as me, actually, but offline. But I mean, she received a lot of support from members of the LEAP Coalition. She's a LEAP fellow. If she wanted to know how the community felt, it's fine to ask other people, but she could have come to our table also and asked us and gotten some feedback from people.
And documented
feedback.
That's
Because you may hear some feedback from different people, and assume also, please, if you're elected to city council, you don't suddenly become more intelligent than the people who elected you. We know things, we understand things, and our collective intelligence is much greater than any one person. Mm-hmm. Our collective perspectives are going to be very different from those that you hear at the council table and in political halls of power. But that doesn't mean that you have to stop listening because now you've learned the truth. Mm-hmm. The truth has to be something that you are willing to consistently try to understand in the communities that you serve.
Anyone who has a dispute about a towing charge can file a petition with the 36th District Court within 20 days of the vehicle being towed. Motorists who want to complain about towing prices can also contact the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division at 517-335-7599, assuming that everybody knows the route to go to 36th District and to file a petition. I don't even know how to begin that process. I hate going to 36th District Court.
Oh, my goodness.
It's so it's just always an inconvenience. You go in there. It's so crazy, how I feel, the way that I feel treated when I go to 36th District Court. It feels so dehumanizing. I'm just I hate having to come here.
The last time I went in there, I had a fit. I was in there to pay off tickets, and I had Apple headphones, not the wireless Apple headphones. The kind you have to plug into your phone.
Yeah.
In my purse. I had no phone. They said you can't take those in here, and I said okay, fine. Can I throw them out because I've been waiting in this line for an hour? They said no, you have to take those back to your car and then come back. And I'm like, why? Why wouldn't you have a place for me to store this? And the lack of concern and just this whole processing, it feels so disrespectful. I'm like, so I was standing there.
It's
I was so angry.
If you come into 36th District, you're a criminal already.
Exactly. And if I wasn't crazy before, by the time, I think I took them and threw them outside and came and stood in another line. I was like, I wish I would walk those to a car. And then when I was done paying my tickets, I came back out and retrieved them from the side of the door.
Oh, Donna.
It was really bad. I felt, and I started thinking about the students who have to go through this every day to get into their school buildings, and people who are experiencing this on a regular basis. And I started understanding some of the frustration, anger, and distancing, because it's not the rules and the policies, it's the stupid rules and the stupid policies that people can have just because they have power.
Yeah.
And it feels very much like we have the power to whatever.
So listen, if you got to go down to 36th District, get a ride, because
but if you get a ride, make sure your ride is around, because I actually had a ride and my ride wasn't around for me. Anyway, the issue is get a ride, make sure you don't have headphones, nothing.
Or a phone.
Or definitely not a phone, but nothing that can ever attach to a phone, like a phone case, a headphone, because
go to
that
36th
is also
District to see our criminal justice system at work. Listen, if you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the Neighborhood Tech Hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Listen, Donna is back from New Orleans, y'all. Last week, she had the pleasure of spending the week in the city and learning more about its history and creating a deeper bond between the unofficial sister cities. Dasjon is an organizer, designer, and planner from New Orleans. He has worked with public agencies, cities, community-based organizations, and the private sector on place-based economic development strategies. Chandra is a facilitator and strategist for Detroit Enterprise Communities Development and Elevating Communities Fund, who worked to organize and coordinate the 5-day visit to New Orleans. Dasjon and Chandra, we are so excited to talk to y'all. Hey, y'all.
So before we get started, I just want to ask you, Chandra, what was the inspiration for this trip to New Orleans?
Well, the Detroit 21, which is a collaborative of the executive directors from many community development organizations from across the city of Detroit. They've been meeting over the years, and part of supporting their leadership and then being a space for leaders to come together and to develop strategies that are really going to be utilized across the city. It was an opportunity to also say, well, who else could we be learning from? So we've had the opportunity to go to New Orleans, to go to another city in Michigan, and also to go to New York. And so the inspiration is really to connect leaders and to provide space for them to have real relationships that can result in learning about new strategies, long-term partnerships, and just really space to just think about your leadership, about your work, about your community, and learn from each other. So it was really inspired in part because of that background, but then also there's a support from a group of community development funders who appreciate what has happened with the Detroit 21, and then it's kind of inspired some other groups to be created. So the New Orleans cohort was actually inspired by the Detroit leaders. So it was an opportunity for those leaders to meet face to face and really learn from each other's work.
All right. So one of the more inspiring leaders we met with was Dasjon. It was really interesting because after listening to his presentation, I was like, wow, this is really great. I was trying to write down everything he was saying. And then I realized that he has a connection to Orlando.
That's my brother. We were instant brothers. I had the opportunity to, I have been fanboying around Dasjon's work for a minute now, and I had the opportunity to invite him to Detroit for a one-on-one interview with the Urban Consulate, and actually that interview with Dasjon is the most viewed Urban Consulate interview we've ever done. He was really that dynamic. It's because of the Billy D. Williams voice, but
I think it's the hair.
And the hair. But when he came here I knew then that I had to go down there. And so I went down there, and Dasjon was a magnificent host. New Orleans is the home, I always say this, that I didn't know I had. My paternal grandmother was born in New Orleans. And so digging up, that family history and visiting where the house that my great-grandparents brought her home to. And, it's amazing. Dasjon, what was it like hosting my Detroit brothers and sisters, man?
No, it was beautiful. It was beautiful to be able to see such a large group of folks from so many different interest points across community development in Detroit, like committed not just to the communities, but to take that travel here to New Orleans, where it's it wasn't super sunny and island-like as people like to think about our spring, but it was amazing just to watch some of the discovery of the history and meaning of the place that I call home, and understanding how so much of our history as Black folks across this country has been hidden from each other, and what that does to inspire each other. Just like Chandra talked about the Detroit cohort inspiring the New Orleans cohort, I saw some mutual learning happening, like discovering the history of the area that I work in, but also so many other partners who are not just doing community development for the sake of, self-determination and liberation, but really doing this work because there's a lineage that they're building upon, and they can see that lineage in a living way here.
Yeah. So, the first day we were there, Chandra had the people from New Orleans introduce themselves. And she said, I don't know what inspired her to ask people how long their families had been in New Orleans. But when I started hearing things like 9 generations and 10 generations, I knew I wasn't in Detroit because we don't have anybody. Honestly, I feel like, I'm long term.
We 5 generations
Yes, we're
in.
5.
5, 6.
Listen, my people have been here since 1919. That's all I'm saying. And we're old Detroiters, okay? We got here before most. Before 1920, you had maybe 5,000 Detroiters. By
Black
1920, Black Detroiters, thank you, Black Detroiters. By 1920, it was something like 20,000, and then it kept growing. So to look and see a community where people have roots going back really far is inspiring, but it's also a little confusing. For example, that we had one lady who, I don't remember her name, who said that her grandfather had walked off of a plantation and moved to New Orleans in right around, was it World War II? And built his home, the family home there. And I'm like, walked off a plantation. I'm trying to, that's not something that we can think of. And people move up north, but we never think of ourselves as having left a plantation in Detroit. I've never heard that language before. And we went to visit the Whitney, and it's so close to the city. And then I found out
drove through Cancer Alley to get to the Whitney, right?
And then I found out that one of our board members, Idra Goudet, is from Wallace County.
Yeah.
And so she says, that's where I grew up. And that was so I still have to talk to Idric about what that means, because we don't have a historical reference. We don't have a cultural context to understand that really well. Can you talk about that, Dasjon, some of that long-term history and what that means in terms of the culture of New Orleans?
Yeah, the thing I compare it to is my first trip to South Africa. And I thought very quickly about how having connection to land in a place, despite dealing with oppression, gives you an extra boost in your spirit when you're trying to make way and make alchemy in the place that you're in. And I saw that in Johannesburg, of course, but in New Orleans, the way I kind of talked about it before was, history is living in a way that we can't avoid and we can't erase because it's in the soil.
It's in the soil.
It's in our river.
Yeah.
And it's there's no way around it. Each brick on the paved road or bayou road has a story, each block, each person. And I know there's an African proverb, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but each person is a library. And so, and whether that's in ourselves or in our stories, I think it gives folks a sense of power to be able to know their history, even if they can't trace where they come from in the from, whether it's West Africa or the Caribbean, but they can say, hey, this is my place. I'm indigenous to this place because this is where I was born and raised, where my blood and my ancestors' blood was spared here. And I think it's significant because we often talk about the transatlantic slave trade and the return to Ghana, but we really don't talk about the domestic slave trade after that ended and what it did to canonize America as a great industrial power in the midst of that, and how many of us across this country, our ancestors, have come through the port of New Orleans and have been on an auction block and sent out to Mississippi or through the Carolinas. This place cements our bodies in a way as marketable, as consumable. And I think this is a battleground for reclaiming, reclaiming our bodies and our spirit in this place. So I tell people, they often they put New Orleans in a bubble and they say, oh, Katrina. And that's what they think of, right? But I tell people, you have to really kind of shift your perspective about this place, mostly because where it goes, just like where the South goes, so does the rest of the nation. So what does it mean to think about this as battleground for where Black folks go?
We actually, say that about Detroit. We refer to Detroit as Big Mama, right? We had the bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy had an impact on us. Sometimes we call it Katrina without a hurricane, without floodwaters, because you end up having the same type of dispossession as a result of some of the policies that have happened in Detroit. So I know at least some Detroiters look at that. And I know that the climate crisis has hit, and Katrina stands out, but you also have, of course, Houston, and you have many other places across the nation where the climate crisis hits us differently. And it's largely due to infrastructure neglect. It's largely due to where we live in relation to climate risk. All of that is there. And then also our ability to recover. So I definitely felt connected to that even before we visited. However, I would like to say that despite some similarities, New Orleans is a unique community, okay?
It's like a country within a country. It really is a culture.
The history of free people of color in New Orleans is not replicated in other places. I actually was reading about it, and New Orleans became a haven for free people of color. And you can't say that in any other southern city, I don't think. So we actually had an opportunity. You took us to the Free People of Color Museum, and it was, beautiful. There was a lot of history there, so much to be learned, and a lot of activism around Black businesses and really protecting and restoring our history. But I could not help but notice as I was sitting in the room that almost all of the pictures on the walls depicted very light-skinned free people of color. And so the color, the correlation between freedom and color, and then the impact of that on the social development of New Orleans is something I became very curious about. Can you speak to that?
Oh, that's a setup. No, I'm kidding.
No, it's not.
No, but I think it's, to your point about New Orleans being unique. We maroonage definitely was protected here, mostly because, we had this sway between French colonial powers, the Spanish colonial powers, to back the French, and because of Black codes, it gave some room. They didn't give us no room, but it gave some room for folks to be self-determining. So even in the midst of having what we would call free people of color, or the images showing of fair-skinned Black folks, there were dark-skinned free people of color.
Yeah.
One of those people was Andre Caillou, a man who fought in the Civil War and fell on the Union side, and was one of the first Black military people to be funeralized and to have a funeral procession during a time when it was illegal for him to even be free. And I know, some of the politics of colorism definitely cement a power or a caste system historically in New Orleans. And, it's I put it all on colonial powers.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
We never chose our skin color. We never chose to be abused. But in the midst of that, there were people mobilizing and organizing for the freedom of all enslaved folks. Right. Yeah. And it's complicated.
Yeah. When we were at the Whitney, the Whitney Plantation, the curator who was walking us through, or I guess he's actually the director of research there, was talking about how different factions of black people were played against each other for the purpose of empowering the slave owner or the people in charge. So it's certainly not the flaws of the people. It's, it is the, I don't blame the people, obviously. I blame the system, but it's a system that seems to be, still you see some remnants of it, I think.
Yeah.
For sure.
And you see it nationally, right?
You do.
I mean, part of it is like thinking about things like, would Barack Obama have been elected if he was a dark-skinned black man? Yes. So that's what I mean by, like, these things are super significant, and you can feel them here because it's smaller, right? As a population, we're only 500,000 people, if that. And our greater metro area is barely 1 million people. But then those things echo across the country because the Great Migration also happened and caste systems existed wherever Europeans were.
And I'm not denying that. I'm just saying it seems like because people go back generations in New Orleans, it's different than here, where people came up south. Like everybody who here from Detroit, it feels like had a sharecropper somewhere in their family, okay? And they left the farm, and it was, we came up and we moved to Detroit to work at Ford's Plan and that kind of thing. The vast majority of Detroiters, that's our pathway.
Yep.
It's why we were getting cussed out in 2011 and 12 when we started talking about urban farming, and black folks on the east side was like, we left the farm to come to a metropolis. Sandra, I saw you agree, and I want to bring you in on the conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when I think on the experience, which it really was a phenomenal week, some of the things that just kind of struck me a little bit more deeply, and I would definitely attribute some of this to Dr. Ibrahim Seek, who was our tour guide and, as you mentioned, was the director. But when we had the initial tour, so the first experience that we had in New Orleans was doing the hop-on, hop-off bus, and we were able to see the city. And so we got to see all the different communities, but then also hearing about, the oldest black neighborhood in Detroit in terms of Treme.
In New Orleans, the Treme neighborhood. You said Detroit.
And then before Dasjon spoke on it, I was actually speaking to some people because they had commented on the architecture and how, we think about shotgun houses as, meaning one thing, but also looking at the African roots. But I didn't want to speak on it. But then Dasjon spoke on it when we were, together. But for me, there were just so many connections back to how pervasive African people have been in basically everything that is great, and how much has been not credited to black people. And just so it's like I could just really see so many connections between Africa and Louisiana and Detroit, but really just looking at like almost everything great that has happened in the world, there's really a black root to it. And I just saw that so much more from this 1 week.
I agree with you.
What was your apprehension? Why were you apprehensive to speak on like some of those things?
Not apprehensive. I'm just saying that when I think about the week, that's one of the things that stands out for me the most is just the black root of everything. And just, again, going how far back so many things go. So even when we talked about Mardi Gras, and you think of Mardi Gras as one thing, but then when you talk to black people, they're like, well, let us tell you what Mardi Gras is really like. Yeah. When you talk about, the colors and the symbols, understand what this symbol, where that root was in a brand. And so it's just like so many things that we don't know have the black roots. I'm saying that this particular trip really it just seemed like it was just flashing more than even having gone to Africa before and then a lot of other places. So to me, that was part of the beauty of this week is, again, just history. And again, not just the Louisiana history, but just the history going all the way back to the beginning of all of us coming from Africa. So again, not that I've never heard that or thought that, but it was just so much of the week for me really spoke to just the roots and how important it is for us to not just know our history, but it's not possible to know our history. That it's really an ongoing knowing and knowing and knowing.
Right.
And deeper, the more you know, then the more it also empowers you to then say, hold it, we need to do some things differently because of that deeper understanding that hopefully keeps evolving. But most people aren't even, that's not a passion of theirs. So I would hope that one of the real outcomes from this trip, and we were invited by Dr. Seek to be ambassadors for their work, but to me, it's more to be ambassadors for the importance of all people understanding our history. And again, knowing that it's not about a book, it's an ongoing, lifelong process of really understanding where we came from and really appreciating who we are as a people.
Right.
Let's put a pin right there, Donna. Let's put a pin right there. We'll be back, and we're going to talk about this history and blood being in the soil and how people are libraries. More with Dasjon and Chandra when we come back.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
All right, welcome back to Authentically Detroit. We are here with Dasjon Jordan and Chandra McMillion. We're talking about this New Orleans and Detroit exchange. Before we went to break down, I cut you off.
No, I was just saying that I think that Chandra's point that you feel the history there. You don't necessarily feel the history here. I mean, we have Motown history. When is that? Mid-century? 20th century? 1960s, up. And here we are in a city where people are going back generations, and so you feel things differently. And people have their own stories and their own pride. It feels as though there's not one New Orleans, but as we drove through neighborhoods, there's so many New Orleans communities that are Black communities where people are really living life and experience life differently. And it's true in Detroit as well. But the historical patterns to that were just really, really interesting to me. I do want to spend some time, though, talking about Dasjon and his work, because we stopped and we were sitting there on the bus. We were in front of a Whole Foods. And I'm like, what are we in front of Whole Foods for, right? And then he gets on the bus and they say, get off the bus. And I realized that this is a person who has helped lead the development of a Whole Foods. Now, we have a Whole Foods in Detroit, but it's not like this Whole Foods because this Whole Foods is in the hood. It's not in a rapidly gentrifying area, or at least it doesn't feel to be. It feels like it's a Whole Foods for the people. And so Dasjon explained how Whole Foods came there, and I thought it was actually bigger than Whole Foods. And so can you explain that development, how it came about, and also what else you're doing with that space?
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate you making some room around that. I know most folks see that Whole Foods and they're like, "No, what in the heck is?"
Well, it's an indicator. It's really an economic indicator of things to come in many instances. And so, tell us how it was different for you.
Yeah, so I would say Broad Community Connections, my organization, developed this project, this community health hub, back in 2013. Was the ribbon cutting. And we ended up with a Whole Foods as a anchor commercial tenant. And the way I tell the story of this site is this was during 2008, 2009 when our organization was just getting started. And as a community development org, we kept pushing and cheerleading and wanting to show folks, hey, like, there's a bigger vision. There could be a better use of the site, of sites across our commercial district. But this building in particular used to be a grocery store chain of its heyday, Schwegmann's, which predated Walmart. And it was derelict for about 5 years. And the owner, our organization, kept pushing to say, hey, like, could you do something? And he said, look, it's going to be a storage unit. He said, you can keep pushing. Unless you have the money to be able to acquire this site, I'm not taking recommendations or suggestions. And so that encouraged our board to figure out how to organize to fundraise enough money to get site control. And we failed 3 times. And then the 4th time, we're able to successfully raise enough money to be able to get site control, but really with no big grand vision on the site. And so what was an empty grocery store building is now known as the Refresh Project, which is a community health hub that has so much in this building. And the way we kind of got Whole Foods involved is that Whole Foods was actually founded in New Orleans. Most folks think Austin, Texas. But Whole Foods was actually a small, independent, fresh food market back in the 80s. Literally, it went in our district. And that owner ended up selling his mom and pop to these folks out of Austin. They bought the name and then created the corporation we know as Whole Foods today. But things come full circle because he ended up being a professor, a local professor, and also was the chairman of the board at that period of time. Mm-hmm. And it was through a lot of organizing and then just relationships because, again, New Orleans is small, that they were able to convince him and his team to figure out how to co-create a site that wasn't just that bougie boutique Whole Foods that we know it, but to figure out how they could be a good partner in mission-driven development. And so that Whole Foods that we have in the building is more like your Trader Joe's version of Whole Foods, more of the fresh produce, more of the 365 brand. But when we first opened, we had an 80% community hiring mandate. So hiring folks right in the neighborhood. We had 2 community health workers actually doing the cost comparison between that and other regional chains of grocery stores. They were able to actually come down on the price point in that location. Of course, not able to market it because then everybody would come all over, but to make sure strategically the products that folks in community bought were a bit more accessible. And in addition to that, we were able to push and activate Whole Cities Foundation to be useful for the whole building, which has a community land trust, nonprofit workforce development kitchen, charter school network with a program called Edible Schoolyards, Boys Town, Louisiana, that does social services for young kids and families. And we have a community teaching farm, Sprout NOLA, on the outside of the building.
Dasjon, can you sort of also contextualize for our listeners the significance of where the Whole Foods market is situated, like physically, and talk a little bit about the Bayou Road work?
Yeah, so I'll say, Broad Street is the second most trafficked area in the city. It is U.S. Highway 90 at its core. And what's really important to know about Broad is that historically it's been diverse but majority Black. And so when we think about all the second line culture and things that people love, like we have Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, which started off as a benevolent society doing mutual aid and support work for widows and for families. So we're in this richness in the context of Treme in the 7th Ward, right? Some of the oldest Black neighborhoods, not just in New Orleans, but in the country. Mm-hmm. And it's abut Bayou Road, which is the oldest place of commerce in the city. And where now we have majority Black ownership of properties, majority Black women, businesses.
Shout out to Ms. Vera at Community Book Center.
Yes, we got to go there.
Yes.
But what's important is that, in a place like Louisiana and a place like New Orleans, people don't really leave And it wasn't until a big disruptor like Katrina that people even started to really imagine themselves
outside
en masse, considering other places. And so, though we do have this great mission-driven development project, we understand that like people see the whole food sign, and not only do community members get concerned, but people, investors, prospective investors put up their "we buy houses" signs, right, to figure out who they can pick out on the market. And we know that gentrification is not just one actor, but we have a medical corridor that displaced an entire neighborhood, right? Their proximity to downtown, right? So these things are all happening at the same time, and our organization is now going from, hey, we were trying to fight to get investment in a place that had been disinvested in for generations, and now we're like, okay, well, what's the anti-displacement play?
And I think that covers Detroit and New Orleans.
Yeah.
I think. Now, I have a couple other questions. That's great history, and hats off to you for doing the work. We actually met with the folks from the Downtown Development District, and their perspectives are, pride in bringing these resources. And we see that in Detroit also, where you can talk to folks and they say, look at all these great things we did.
I ran into Eric Larson this morning. I did at the coffee shop.
Yes. So, you have people who bring that perspective, but the people who live there, whose neighborhoods are disrupted and impacted, have a different story to tell. It's important that people like you are there to lift up those stories and also help empower the people to protect their space, because we don't, erasure is the bigger threat of gentrification, even sometimes, than just the physical displacement. It's erasing our history. It's renaming our streets, and all of a sudden this Broad Street becomes a medical corridor, and it's got a cool new name, Kidney Drive, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I'm just being ridiculous. I'm sorry. But
Gosh.
but you know how people like to rename things, and this is historical too,
That's
right?
major. Yep.
And that's what happened in the continent of Africa, where Europeans went in and started drawing boundaries and renaming things. That's part of conquest. Is we rename, we boundary, all of that kind of stuff. And so for many of us working in the field, and we have been really benefiting from the largesse of foundations recently who've invested in enterprise communities, and through that in a community development fund that brings, I think now, about 23 nonprofits together, 24, 25, how
24
many?
for Detroit.
24 for Detroit, 20. Detroit 21.
6 for the elevating CDO.
So Detroit 21 now has 24 organizations plus 6. So we're 30 strong.
Y'all expanding like the Big Ten.
We are. And we can only do that with a strength of foundations that really believe in us. We have a couple foundation leaders, Brian Hogle and
Shout out to Brian Hogle. Shout out
and
to
Kevin Ryan,
Yes.
who really have paved the way to say, let's invest in capacity. Let's not just invest in outcomes like a lot of people do, but in capacity. And also let's invest in building of this community. When we were in New Orleans, one of the things I saw was that your organization was probably, and Chandra, I had to miss a couple things because I had conflicts, but it felt closer to me to what we're doing in Detroit in terms of community development, where you are engaging in development and bringing the residents along with this vision. You're doing things we haven't done, but I'm just saying the structure and intent of that seems a little bit different than some of what we saw. Like Helping Hand feels very different from Broad Community Connections. Can you speak to that? And are there many other organizations that are doing the kind of work that you're doing in New Orleans?
Yeah, I would say, I think the separation between work and personal life, they unfortunately they don't really exist here. And part of that is being in the city of
It don't
neighborhoods.
exist here either.
But it's in a way that, I'm in the office in a meeting with one person, and I leave to go to the grocery store. I run into that person immediately after. Then I go and have dinner, and I run into their partner or their family. So in a way, we are inextricably connected, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us to kind of deal with whatever internal temper tantrums we might have, or bones to pick we might have. But
Thank you for naming that, because this work is also messy. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah, and I don't want to glamorize it, because we have our moments too. It's like, think about your siblings or your cousins.
I'll be ready to slap them.
You're super close to, and there's some cousins you're like, I'm okay if I don't see you at the next family gathering, but we're gonna make sure you eat.
That's right.
It's not about me liking you or not liking you. It's about making sure your survival is inevitable. And I would say there are a ton of groups doing the work here. One I want to elevate is the Ujima Economic Development Corporation, and they're kind of our perfect pair. And that when we talk about Robert Moses and highways that go to nowhere, they got one of them, right? The Claiborne Expressway, and
under the bridge.
Right. You're right. Yes, that was the other one. I'm sorry. There was two.
No. You're good. Look, I understand. It was a lot in a short amount of time.
No, but they're good. I just feel like, one of my questions was around philanthropy and whether or not you have the kind of philanthropy in New Orleans that actually supports this work, because we do in Detroit.
That's a
Now, we're gonna have to do a part two. Can you answer that question in 60 seconds? We got 1 minute left.
Yeah. What I'll say is this: now there's new piqued interest in supporting that convening and capacity building and like shared impact work. Over the last decade, it's been a challenge, mostly because people go, "Oh, we invested because of Katrina, but we don't know what's the result." And I tell people, you have a huge impact here to set a course for the nation if you decide to invest in that shared reality.
So here's my hope. My hope is that people will continue to come together. Enterprise will continue to work with Detroit, and we will continue to help foster resource investment in New Orleans so that it's not just this one cohort, but other people are looking and saying, let's replicate this aspect of Detroit.
Yes.
We need to bring your history to Detroit, and we need to help you develop a resource pool that supports what you're doing so more organizations can do it. The Gulf Coast organization, Angela Chalk is working with some folks, and I think she's doing great work, and there's others there who could use support.
I absolutely love it. Look, and we got to go back down there. Let's do a remote broadcast of Authentically Detroit live from Bayou Road in New Orleans. We could do it with Miss Vera at the Community Book Center. I love Miss Vera. So listen, y'all got to come back because this was not enough time. The studio was booked after this. We got to go. Listen, Dasjon, thank you for joining us via phone. Chandra, thank you so much for coming in. Listen, if you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. We thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, we want you to catch the wave.